Hello and welcome to another League of Legends video, and in this one I shall be asking and answering one very simple question. Which is better for climbing? Macro or mechanics? Brain versus fingers? Wait a second. Which is better though, macro ability or uber micro ability, if you will allow me a pure ownage reference? But it is a very common question that I get in the comments. Which jungler can I use for macro play? Which jungler is the most mechanical and allows outplay so that I can 1v9 against my team? And yes, those words were chosen intentionally. So what I will do is define what I mean by brain and what I mean by mechanics. I will look at how they are linked, and then I will give tips to improve at both, as well as anecdotes from my own personal journey last season where I got Master Tier at almost 32. So if you enjoy these general videos as well as the jungle tutorials, please consider leaving a like and of course subscribing for all the content coming your way, as well as looking at Patreon as well as the second channel for even more fun stuff. And now without hesitation, let's begin. First of all, we are going to talk about the brains or the macro of the game. Why? Well, simply put, it is a strategy game. A lot of you might not feel that way depending on your MMR and what kind of animal species you have on your team for that particular day. But yes, macro is ultimately the thing that allows you to develop game plans, understand minion wave control if you're a laner, maybe jungle clear pathing, vision ward placement relevant to the enemy jungler, perhaps as a jungler dealing with invades and then reading the map through advanced jungler tracking, if you're a laner or even a jungler avoiding danger with big brain 200 IQ pathing. This is absolutely fundamental when you're trying to move around the map, go for roams, rotate to fights, basically surprise the enemy without being detected, even things like preparing waves and so on for objective takes, as junglers watching those waves so that you can actually time your ganks appropriately. All of this is a part of your early game macro. None of this has anything to do with your mechanical ability to pilot your champion. The funny thing is, stuff like this can be very easily overlooked. For example, if you are ahead in experience, gold items, whatever, you happen to be a mid laner, you pull the wave you allow to push in your direction and almost crash in your tower. Maybe you've even pre-traded and the enemy laner doesn't have as much HP. A good jungler with good macro awareness and strategy will be observing this and then path to basically take an opportunistic gank. However, players who have macaroni instead of macro will instead be doing the gromp, smoking the krugs, or what have you. And yes, this really does happen in pro play quite a bit. It has been really on the focus during LCS, LEC, and LCK playoffs. Macro also takes hold in the mid to late game especially, and that's where most of you think it exists. When I said using your brain in macro, I bet most of you were actually just thinking late game. Everything I've said so far is basically early game. Even paying attention to things such as when to use global ultimates, TF, Karthus, GP, these are not mechanical plays, they're very much heavily focused on the macro. Using your brain to basically understand win conditions, take objectives, move around the map, not throw games, understanding game flow, and yes, even good itemization, lane swaps, and back timing. I specifically mention itemization because the shopkeeper Boris seems to be on a world tour at the moment trying to give everyone inefficient and inappropriate itemization. And you know exactly what I'm talking about. Now, none of what I said should affect what champion or what jungler you are playing. You can be playing LeBlanc mid, Set top, Volibear jungle, anything on the bottom lane because it doesn't really matter. And the more proficiency you gain at the game, the better you become, the higher you climb, the more these things are becoming second nature and the better you're getting at reading them, adapting, and using them. This contrasts directly with mechanics or micro, which is essentially anything to do with using your champion and basically making outplays and getting leads through the PvP sense. So while League does have a ton of macro and strategy that defines what it is, it's also inherently linked and connected to mechanics and micro. And yes, I do apologize to all the citizens of the game, this is simply a reality. Essentially, 1v1 skirmishing, CSing, kiting, trading, the ability cooldown feel, knowing when to go in, when to go out, keeping that auto and spell spacing, which effectively is just knowing how to trade, but then you've also got skill shot landing percentage. Hell, even jungle clearing on certain champions like Karthus, Nidalee, Sylas, Rengar all have a certain amount of mechanical proficiency that allows you to become more efficient and therefore make more plays with those champions. And yes, you might have the matchup knowledge for all of these complex, high elo quote-unquote champions, but execution is very important. And that's why on these champions, we save them for higher elo or more experienced players that might have more mechanical aptitude that allows them to maximize those champion kits. And now we can begin to discuss how they're fused together and how they're connected. I guess we can just simply say they're Kayn and Rost. It's very easy to go to a stat site, look up the combos, understand what you're meant to do with Akali, but once you get into the game, if you physically cannot press the buttons quick enough, if you cannot anticipate and trade appropriately, as well as basically make those outplays necessary to get fed, then your macro knowledge and ability of the champion really doesn't amount to much. But conversely, good mechanics can allow you to gain leads and win fights you probably shouldn't, especially the lower down you go. This inflates your ego and makes you think you're all that, when in fact you're perhaps Silver 3 or Diamond 4. Your mechanical ability might allow you to brute force a lane win over your opponent and basically cover up the noodle state of your mind. You can continue to shove, win all fights as a byproduct of your disgusting lead, and you're just so far ahead that as long as you're in the fights, hitting the towers and basically taking over the game, then nothing else matters. The thing is, this ability diminishes the higher you go as a player, as enemies will play safer. They will understand when you have a lead. People like me who are not the most mechanical players will understand as on top lane that I will scale. I just have to manipulate the wave that's in the best position for my jungler. I know I have TP advantage and teamfight advantages, so I'm okay giving you a little bit of CS here as long as I don't feed and die. All of a sudden, the mechanical player has to think more about their lane and how they're going to get fed on the map. This can happen very often from the jungle position as well. You win 1v1s because your champ allows outplays and the enemy perhaps misses their spells. They are not adept, you are. The problem with jungle is if you have a Rengar who is very mechanically good and he beats you in the river 1v1, you can begin to lose map control, and so now you would need to rely on your macro ability instead of your micro ability in order to actually basically survive in the game. Now in the old days of League, season 1, 2, 3, maybe even a bit of 4, using your brain was really not common compared to now. And I really mean that in terms of ignorance. We just didn't have a game that allowed the macro to the level it does now. We just didn't have a game where you really needed to think about it as much due to the nature of how everything was balanced and how snowbally things could get. I mean, it can seem like you have teammates with an echo chamber skull at the moment, but if we were to compare macro in every elo to that of even season 4, you would notice absolutely huge changes on how each rank plays. There's a reason people want to go back to that time when mid lane Zeds could just fake it everyone. This is good and bad, of course. It's good because it allows individual skill expression and the ability to solo carry games, but it's bad because League inherently has complex and intricate strategies that are fundamental to what's allowed it to stick around so long because we have this sort of combination of both styles of play. This ultimately means that even if you get huge leads from mechanical outplays, you're a mechanical player, you understand how to outplay your opponents, win 2v1s, maybe even 3v1s, you will definitely be able to cover up your macro weaknesses to a large degree, because brute force numbers really overtakes any sort of macro. You could have an excellent team fight, but if the enemy Akali is 3 levels up and basically destroys your ADC, destroys your mid laner, and basically collapses down, the Akali will simply be able to carry the game. However, as you begin to match people that can match your own mechanical ability, you will find yourself constantly throwing with bad decisions, with bad macro. And I even made a video about this last week, talking about the mechanical and macro mistakes that can cost you all a lot of wins, a lot of LP, and you really shouldn't have to give any of those up. And really, I will say in the modern day game, in this arena is where macro and micro combine. Team fighting. It's all very well having the best target focus. It's all very well having the best position. If you don't hit your spells, if you miss your spells, you can actually end up throwing the fight. On the other side, you can basically hit all your spells, destroy the person you were focusing, but if you're focusing the wrong person or taking the fight at the wrong time, you might actually end up losing the fight because the person you should have been focusing has killed the rest of your team. Then you get cleaned up, they get the Baron, and all of a sudden they're sitting in the driver's seat. I don't know about you, but when that happens, I find it disgusting. Great mechanical players will have an ego, as they always do, and find it much easier to climb into something like Platinum, maybe even lower Diamond. This is of course assuming that you're pretty good at the game and you're able to pilot whatever champions you're using, and they're also very good at outplays. That's very important. That's why they have egos. In fact, I'm just gonna Guardians of the Galaxy to this reference and say most of these players think they have their own planet. Big brain macro-orientated players with certain picks can certainly carry games, you know, if you're on your Rammus, your Sejuani, your Zac, depending on your elo, but you will rely on your carries to play around it well, and so it can take a lot longer and a lot more patience to get to the upper echelons of the ladder. However, your macro is inherently tied to why a lot of people actually win or lose on the champions that suit this purpose. Think your top lane tanks, think your Ivan jungles, maybe even a nice Braum support. If you don't shield the right person, if you don't position yourself accordingly, ward in the right place, heal the right target, engage at the right time, you can simply, even with the best macro, end up losing the game. So to basically summarize this section, if you basically make the right play but you miss a skill shot, you misplay it, you focus the wrong person, you can lose even though it was the right decision. And sometimes, great mechanical players will win these bad situations as a byproduct of their ability and win games they shouldn't. So yes, you can climb with great macro. It will take longer and you will basically be more susceptible to mechanical misplays considering the importance of each decision, which is why it's recommended that you play simpler champions that allow you to focus on your strengths rather than your weaknesses and basically avoid having mistakes because you're not able to pilot your champion correctly. Mechanical plays, that's why we recommend things like Lee Sin, Nidalee, Akali. Irelia, Callista, what have you. You know, great Smurf champions that simply allow you to outplay enemies, get leads, and basically smash them against the wall until you win. But in the end, macro will catch up to you, and the players that have the best fusion of that are the ones that will very often climb to the top of the ladder. Doesn't mean they're perfect in either arena, it just means they're better than the rest. Now, in terms of improving this, when I decided to go full-time on YouTube at the end of last year and decided, hey, you know what, I've always been full-time work, it's been difficult to find a lot of time to play, let's actually try and get out of that D2 hole and get to master. Problem is, I'm a brain player, I like macro, I like basically map manipulation and destroying people through excellent pathing and outplays and tracking. I would honestly be afraid to make certain plays because I did not trust my ability to win those mechanical situations, especially with the champions I was playing, and thus I would lose advantages I could have gained by being a more mechanical champion or player. The solution? Pick a jungler that has decent mechanical ability or strong early game such as a Rek'Sai, allow me to make decisive actions, become extremely fluid at my skirmishing in and out with my W burrows, knockups, alt repositioning, auto cancels, and what have you. Refine my clear so that I can be the first level 3 ganker in every single game. This allowed me to basically control map tempo in every game I played, gave me first dragon, first herald, I could ping pong those objectives, I could invade and use my level lead over enemy junglers, I could very easily dive enemy laners, and if there was a carry on my team that really took off, I could support them by always shadowing and being able to direct fights. And how do I do that? It was very simple. Every day I went into practice tool multiple times before I'd go into a game, practice my first clear, practice my flash mechanics and auto cancels on dummies, and ultimately the results were very good, and to this day my Rek'Sai is one of my cleanest champions. Yeah, I know I always talk about using Zyra and Ornn, but honestly that's not for climbing, that's because I just want to enjoy the game, and I'm very limited to using my macro. Sure, my mechanical ability on those champions is excellent, but I don't think you want to be a Zyra against a Rengar in a bush in the jungle, and I'm more reliant on my lanes getting leads and helping me out. For mechanics, practice makes perfect, looking up the combos, reading them, going into practice tools, and yes, spamming. You really need to know what you're actually trying to do with the champion, and you need to do it over and over again. And much like math, some people will get it in 10 goes, some people will get it in 50, and maybe some of you it might take 500. And for some of us, we just might never be able to play Aurelia with the fluidity necessary to actually make it work. I tried it once, I eat a minion, I queued the wrong thing, my wrists hurt, so I stopped. And to close, for improving your macro, listen, mechanical gods, Lord egos. Really, once you get to platinum, please start to focus on your macro. Start to ask what you want to do in order to win games. What is your mid-game plan? What is your late-game plan? Why are you fighting this? How are you fighting this? When are you fighting this? And somewhere Drax is sitting invisible, nodding his head in agreement. The same for you and Diamond. At this point, your macro ability really needs to catch up to your micro, and you can solve a lot of questions by simply asking, why am I going in this direction? What do I want to accomplish? Watch macro guides, I have a whole bunch. Get professional coaching if you need it. Doesn't have to be from me, it can be from anyone else that you trust their opinion on how to actually play out the strategic element of the game beyond the mechanical. Some are great at one or the other, some are okay at both. One requires a lot of physical practice and basically repetition. The other one does also to a certain degree. You need experience in this arena. But yes, it's a bit of studying. Some people are basically better at one, better than the other, some are a fusion. Zero in either category will often lead you to being stuck somewhere, mostly in low elo. And yes, one tricks can often, mechanically outplay everything. They don't really need to think about macro, and they can cover up a lot of their weaknesses by supreme knowledge of every matchup. But there you have it, a nice outline of macro versus micro, brain versus fingers. Identify which one you are, and if you're good at mechanics, hit the books. If you're good at the books, hit the gym. Offset your weaknesses, enhance your strengths, and 100% you will climb much quicker, much more successfully, and get all the e-girls or e-boys you've ever wanted. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you were able to enjoy and learn something. Please do like, share, and comment if you did. Another video will be coming right up on Saturday, so don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for that. I noticed the bells are a little low on the execution. I appreciate all the support, and as always, I will see you all in the next tutorial.